Okay, welcome to part 2 of my survival crops video. I just finished talking about lentils in the other one. My name is Nathan Donnelly. This is Northwest Resilience. I'm talking about survival crop foods. Part 1 I just went through, had about 7 or 8 different plants in it, and talked about a few other things, but I'll get started back up here. The last piece of what I think is really valuable to grow in a survival garden is herbs and spices. If you are growing a lot of staple crops, eating unadorned potatoes for weeks on end is going to not be fun after, very short order. So having a variety of herbs is not only going to make your palate a lot more happy. A lot of those herbs, like Italian parsley, is more iron rich than just about anything there is. A lot of them are medicinal. They're actually medicinal herbs. So there's different, you can do some research into what herbs are going to bring the most versatility to your place and grow those. A lot of herbs too are perennial, like rosemary. I am a massive fan of perennial foods. If you have a place where you can grow fruit trees or nut trees or berries, or anything with a woody stem, something that lasts a long time. You only have to plant it once. It establishes a root system, and hopefully you don't even have to water it anymore. So a good-sized standard apple tree can outproduce probably 95% of the gardens that are grown in the United States in pure poundage of food. So if you can tuck perennials into whatever piece of property you're hopefully on, you're going to be happy you did. I will do a video on fruit tree pruning at some point, and in orchard care in general. That's actually probably my biggest specialty in the permaculture world. But move towards perennial crops if you're in a place where you're going to be there for a long time, or if you care about who's going to be there after you are. Put that in the ground. It's a lot less work. It's better for the soil. It's a lot less resources, etc., etc. So my honorable mentions would be other crops that I think maybe aren't quite so easily to widely grow, or they're not, they don't check quite so many boxes. But they need to be mentioned because they're gonna fill out the diet, and they're delicious. So onions, big one. We all know how important onions are in however many cuisines. They add a lot of flavor. They're also medicinal. Onions and garlic both. I'm going to put garlic in that group as well. Garlic, maybe you're not getting as many pounds out of it, but it's a superfood. It's medicinal, especially in terms of preventing illness and keeping your gut flora really healthy. So if I'm feeling a little bit ill, one of the very first things I do is I grab a clove of garlic, I peel it, and I mince it small enough to where I can swallow it like pills. And I'll just take a little handful of it and swallow it with water. I don't have to chew it up. I don't have to destroy my breath for the day. But that works miracles. I've been doing that for years now, and I really, very few occasions I can think of where I've been sick for more than a day or two. So garlic is a fantastic thing to be growing. Parsnips. I'm going to say parsnips and other big kind of carrot root things, obviously big, very productive. You can grow a parsnip the size of my forearm, and in some places I've lived in California, they actually naturalized. The parsnips were growing wild. So if you're finding a plant that will grow without you taking care of it at all, zero in on that. That's another thing with kale. I have seen kale growing wild around here that has self-seeded on its own. Cilantro is an herb that does that really well. But if you've got something that's coming up as a volunteer, practically as a weed in your area, learn how to turn that thing into your food source, because it obviously wants to grow there. It's gonna give you a lot fewer headaches for that. Summer squash I touched on a little bit earlier, but man, some of those summer squashes just rip out food. They don't have a long shelf life. That's why I haven't really put them in one of the top 10. But they will put out so much food, and I have dried zucchini really successfully. It can be frozen. It can be used in a lot of different ways. But I have used zucchini God knows how many different ways. So that goes with your crooked net squashes and your yellow squashes and all those other summer squashes. very productive crop, very easy to grow, and they're beautiful, and they mix up the variety in your food a little bit. Tomatoes, particularly if you've got a greenhouse like this right here, you can grow gonzo amounts of tomatoes. If you're a canner, then you can go nuts with that, making salsa and sauces and all that stuff. This potting bench that I grew here actually is on the north side, so the sun passes over on this side of this greenhouse here. But I built it with 3/4 inch gaps between here. That's partially so soil can go through when we're potting here, but also I would like to be growing tomatoes underneath this thing, and I'll grow them right up through the bench and trellis them up on against this back wall here, and they'll get as tall as the peak of this greenhouse. But if you're doing that, you're taking up very little space in here. They're growing on the back wall. They're not casting any shade on anything else that's in here. And oh man, I have grown some tomatoes that tasted like tomato sauce off the vine. Like Cherokee purples and all that. There's few things that will boost your morale if you're not feeling that great than a vine ripened, like an honestly vine ripened tomato out of your own greenhouse. So I have a greenhouse here. We live in a maritime climate. You can grow tomatoes outdoors here, but it shortens your growing period. A lot of people don't quite understand, the point of a greenhouse is to make your season longer, to be able to grow earlier on, like all these starts right here. We started doing this a month and a half ago, I bet, and a lot of them are already out in the ground. So, but once the fall rains come and everything in October, I have had in my greenhouse in the past, I picked my last tomato on Christmas Day. So that's pretty freaking cool. Tomatoes are actually a perennial plant where they're from in the tropics. So if you can keep one alive through the wintertime, then you can start your growing season off with a huge plant. Think of the productivity you'll get out of that. I haven't been able to pull that off myself yet in any of the places I've lived, but it is very possible to do, and tomatoes are a good crop to add into that. Another one that I think is pretty important and is very easy to do in your window, even if you're in an apartment with a sunny window in it, is microgreens. You can sprout your own seeds. You can do them in a jar. There's a bunch of different ways to do sprouts and or microgreens. And sprouted seeds, I want to talk about this a little bit. So say you are way into some kind of seed as a piece of your diet. Almonds, rice, anything that's a seed that you plant it and it becomes a new plant. They typically have something in them. What's the term I'm looking for right now? Well, they've got phytotoxins in them, which is something that a lot of plants have in them to keep them from being eaten. And it also disrupts your digestion, so you're not pulling as much nutrition out of it. But if you're able to sprout your seeds before you eat them, they release something like up to 80% more nutrition into your digestive system because they've got their digestive enzymes have been released. They've got enzyme inhibitors in them when they're just trying to be, a time capsule that's trying to stay the same until just the right conditions come for sprouting. So you want to turn all those enzyme inhibitors off, and you can do that by sprouting. That's a whole subject on its own that I recommend you look into. But for example, when I do pinto beans, I will actually soak my beans for 3 or 4 days in water, and I'll change the water out 2 or 3 times a day just as I pass by it. And the digestibility of pinto beans, the musical fruit, becomes 100%. I mean, there's no problems with gas. There's none of that stuff anymore after about day 3. So the amount of nutrition I'm getting out of it, in addition to that side benefit, is much increased. So I'm going to use that as kind of my last honorable mention because it's not on a lot of people's radar, and it's available for all of you urbanites who maybe don't have a plot of soil to plant in. I'm going to recommend also, if you have any kind of place that's open to the sun at all, getting some containers like these, or 5-gallon buckets, or even cardboard boxes for some crops. inside of a milk crate or something, you can do container gardens that kick butt. I grew a container garden once on a patio that was on a mother-in-law apartment I lived in Northern California, that I couldn't keep up with it. I couldn't eat fast enough to keep up with the amount of greens in particular that I was growing in that garden. So container gardens, if you are relegated to an apartment with a balcony or something like that, is another real sweet thing to do. And even if you're in a big, we have a half an acre here fenced in for our garden. I'm not hurting for space or anything like that, but you can, with a container, just bullseye a microclimate in your space. So to my north here, I have a south-facing wall up against the shop building. Well, that south-facing wall is a really bright color, for one thing. It's like a lot of the light that's shining down me right now is actually bouncing off the wall of that shop. It's very bright. Well, plants like that too. So it's south-facing, so it's accumulating a lot of heat from the sun in the northern hemisphere. And I could grow, tomatoes till my heart's content outdoors, right up against that south-facing wall. Or if I wanted to plant a fig tree, for example, I would do it on a south-facing wall. Things like that. Microclimates are really important to understand, and containers just, let you put your plant right there where you want it to be, and really take advantage of that. So if you found this to be helpful, I realize it's fairly stream of consciousness. It's kind of how I operate, but I like to be custom when I'm doing consultations with people. I like them to be bouncing ideas off of me so I can help them in a manner that really is relevant to their home. So please contact me. You can contact me in the comments or send me a message or something like that, and I will be happy to consult with you on all things permaculture and homesteading. Anything disaster preparedness related, and anything survival related. So I hope you all are weathering this really well and finding ways to actually make this be a valuable time for you. So this is Nathan Donnelly with Northwest Resilience, and everybody be useful and have a good day. Bye.